Hello and welcome to Energy Unplugged by Aurora. This podcast features various experts from Aurora having in-depth conversations with key industry leaders, policymakers and academics from all over the world. It explores the hottest topics across the energy market and gives a unique perspective on major energy issues.
Welcome to Energy Unplugged, a podcast by Aurora Energy Research. My name is Alexander Esser, and I'm heading Aurora's Stockholm office in our coverage of the Nordic and Baltic energy markets. Today, I'm extremely excited about my conversation as I'll be speaking with a guest who is Executive Vice President of Generation and member of the executive management of one of the largest electricity and heat generators in the Nordics, a utility that published a new strategy just a few weeks ago after a year full of turmoil, including divestment from the continent. My guest on the show is Simon-Erik Ollus from Fortum. Welcome, Simon.
Thank you.
Okay, by the way of introducing yourself, prior to heading the generation division, you held several roles at Fortum, such as the chief economist. Also, you will take over the lead of corporate customer and market strategy development by April. In public, you're a strong proponent of a Nordic electricity market instead of a national governance. You are Swedish-speaking Finn, based at Fortum's headquarters in Espoo, outside of Helsinki, and you're an economist by training, started your career at the Bank of Finland. So let's start with your personal journey, Simon. What brought you from economics to the energy industry? And I'm especially interested in that as you ended up managing the generation division, traditionally more reserved for engineers.
Yes. I've been curious in my mindset all the time, and we're very curious to learn more and understand how systems and energy systems, etc. works. Actually, a long time ago, I followed my father's footsteps. He was an engineer, and I went to the University of Engineering to study also, University of Technology to study engineering. But after 2 years of energy engineering, I actually concluded that I don't want to become an engineer. I want to go and read social science instead to the university and started to study economics. And then I ended up anyhow making first a master and after that almost a PhD in system theory and economy and natural resource economies, etc. And started actually as a researcher then on natural resource economies. And then during that journey, I found myself working with like natural resource economies, for example, like the Russian economy. And through the years, I found myself also actually supporting Fortum when it went into Russia many years ago. And then after that, I found myself also working in Fortum. And after that, I found myself actually heading then a generation business and studying like engineering at the University of Technology would as well has been making me competent to this role.
Okay, interesting. That's very the opposite to actually my personal journey, as I'm an energy engineer by training, and now I'm mostly involved in market modeling. Probably a topic that you also oversaw as chief economist at Fortum a few years ago. So what role do you think modeling plays actually in energy markets?
Modeling is very important and modeling is fun, and it's fun to do sophisticated models about the future and how the energy system works. And overall, of course, the energy system is a very complex animal and it's getting even more complex over time. I think models are important. And of course, when you want to forecast the future, it's important. But I think also a lot of other things plays a role. How political development goes, public perception even, technology and so on. So the model is as good as the model, like the inputs are. So crap in, crap out. And I think here actually, the demands and the complexity is just increasing, which is actually also making it intellectually even quite fun to try to forecast the future today.
Yeah, I can fully agree. It's become much more complex over time in terms of how to model energy markets. And I also agree it's extremely difficult to forecast certain political events or events like the war last year or the ongoing war. So this comes actually then to the next topic. I would like to talk about Fortum's new strategy, which is now 1 or 2 weeks old, and probably also based on what has happened last year. So can you give our listeners the main headlines of what is included in the new strategy?
We published the Fortum's new strategy in early March, and we've been working it during the winter, and it's actually quite simple. The purpose of the company is to power a world where people, businesses, and nature thrive together. And those are like powerful words, and they actually tell already quite a lot. Then, I mean, we want to be like a responsible player, delivering responsibly clean energy and good security of supply to our customers. And we want to support the industry decarbonization, as we call our customers. And based on this, we actually build a strategy. So we see that there is a huge need for like companies to decarbonize themselves, and a company like Fortum can, through very responsible clean energy, support the customers also to succeed in the next period. And it's as simple as that. And then we are focusing primarily on the Nordic region for the time being.
I mean, there are definitely a few topics I would like to dive into today. I want to dive into this industrial decarbonization, into the points you made around clean energy and security of supply. But maybe before going into that, the geographical component to it. So you decided to say goodbye to your Russian activities, and also focusing more on the Nordics, divesting from Uniper last year. So is the goodbye to Russia, the goodbye to continental European power markets, temporary or for good?
I mean, we reported now with the annual result that the Russian operation is discontinued operations. And as we said, strategically, we want to leave the Russian market, and that's the process is ongoing. And Uniper, we divested in the end of December to the German state. So for the time being, the focus is on the Nordic market, where a major part of our operations currently are.
And within the Nordics, you mentioned industrial decarbonization as one of the mainstays of your strategy. Can you provide some examples of solutions that you're already providing, or that you want to provide to industries in this region?
That the Nordics will actually become a quite attractive place for energy-intensive industry to be present. Already today, actually, I mean, the Nordic magic with the Nordic power market and utilizing the Nordic resources efficiently has made that we actually have more an energy-intensive industry than rest of Europe, like for the time being. And that has prevailed the competitiveness of the energy-intensive industry. Now with the huge need to decarbonize, we are seeing that there is an opportunity for a huge investment boom. And we already see a lot of Nordic companies also who have huge needs to decarbonize, going away from fossil fuel usages to clean power. And that's what the Nordics actually can offer. And we also see that from a European point of view, the Nordic region is most likely going to have the most competitive energy available for players in the region if we play things smartly. And that's then, of course, a niche where Fortum wants to be the enabler, supporting our customers to succeed going further. And some examples that we have already publicly told, we are helping, for example, Microsoft to invest in a data center region in the capital region of Helsinki, which is a big foreign investment coming into Finland. And we are also even taking the waste heat of the data centers to the district heating system of Espoo, a new concept actually making some of the most energy efficient data centers in the world. And for example, in January, I was also happy that we could announce a cooperation with Blastire, a Norwegian player who wants to build a CO2-free steel factory also in Finland, where Fortum is then supporting the project. And I see more, let's say, opportunities for companies like Fortum to help other companies to succeed and be successful and increase their competitiveness in the next period. And this is maybe a little bit a change from a classical power utility model, where we are only working through centralized markets and producing our power, to a world where we are clearly seeing that companies like Fortum can play a big difference in supporting industrial customers to be successful and support their competitiveness, especially in Sweden and Finland, where a major part of our power production is today.
Mm. And I mean, that's also very much aligned with the narrative that we hear around a lot of industrial projects in the Nordics, that you have those three aspects of or three advantages: security of supply, green electricity, and very competitive, very, very cheap electricity. So looking at those three aspects, what do you think will be the biggest challenge going forward to maintain that?
I think all of them are important, and for me, it's not only green; it's also clean electricity is important, and that there is enough clean power available. Then security of supply is becoming an issue, and especially after the energy crisis, customers are more and more concerned on security of supply. And there is an increasing understanding also that we need a balanced energy system going further, which has various kind of capabilities in the system. So we also ensuring that it's secure in the next period. And then, of course, all of this has to be done in a competitive manner, in an efficient manner, so the bill is not too big of it. And here I see that the Nordic region has a lot to offer, also going further.
Yeah, so maybe let's pick up the security of supply aspect. So, I mean, there's no questions around the wind resources in the Nordics, and we also see a solar boom in the south of Sweden, in Denmark, or even in Finland. But the big question is, of course, what would provide flexibility to such a system going forward. So, as hydropower is somewhat limited, so the potential for new hydropower is limited. So what do you think? Where's the flexibility coming from going forward?
No, I mean, it will come from several generation forms. Of course, I would wish that you could build even more hydropower and pump storages going further. Batteries will play an important role. Demand side management will be increasingly important. Hydrogen over time will play an important role. We need more actually flexibility to the system and sector coupling. But then, of course, the inconvenient truth also, when I discuss with a lot of our customers, I mean, everybody want to have like firm capacity. And that is, of course, let's say the market design challenge we have ahead. How do we ensure that also in the next period, we have a well-functioning, balanced energy system? The Nordics benefit is today that the hydro battery is enabling us to build much more intermittency. And we are the fastest growing onshore wind market for the time being. But of course, long term, we also need to ensure that we have a balanced system and we have the right kind of capabilities, and that we also ensure the competitiveness of the system. And maybe here, I mean, I think we are discussing a lot actually the physical power markets today, and we are developing them a lot as we need, creating more ancillary service marketplaces, increasing the flexibility and volatility of the system, also installing a lot of intermittency. But we are not maybe enough discussing actually the hedging markets, how actually to enable for consumers, for producers, also marketplaces where they can actually also hedge themselves for the uncertainty that is increasing. And this, I think, is an unbalanced in the power market design, that we have a lot of focus on physical power markets, real-time markets, but not on the hedging markets.
So could you provide an example of what we need in those hedging markets? And second question, do you think this is the right way to incentivize more dispatchable generation or flexible demand going forward?
I mean, in a perfect world, we would put much more emphasis on hedging markets also, and creating hedging instruments which are liquid and available for market participants, either like on their so-called hedging horizon or even investment frame horizon, to invest in right kind of capabilities so we have a robust energy system in the next period. Today, unfortunately, because of European-wide legislation and how we are regulating various marketplaces, this development is not happening. And we are actually seeing that hedging markets are getting more and more difficult all the time. And that's partly probably also the reason why, for example, PPAs, power procurement agreements, have become, for example, in renewable built out so popular. They have been creating a bilateral market instead, because the marketplaces has not been like up to speed what they should be delivering.
How to reform the energy market is really something that is currently hotly discussed in Brussels, and we have several proposals by different member states like Spain, Greece. I think Finland has co-signed a joint letter on the priorities with Germany and Denmark. So do you think the aspects around the hedging market is actually missing in such proposals today?
Yes, it's missing from that proposal today. That because the competence of energy markets in Europe is mainly on the physical markets, and then the hedging markets or financial markets are steered by ESMA and by actually the financial industry, which is more generic to other kind of products also. And somehow we have in the overall market design debate, I think, often forgotten actually about the hedging instruments, that the major part of the consumers and the producers also have a huge need actually to de-risk themselves also from potential risks at the physical markets. And this is unfortunately, I think, lacking in the discussion. And then we have had high prices during Q4 because there have been a scarcity on certain kind of capabilities in the power system. And of course, we would also want the power system to be in balance, so we have the right kind of capabilities and enough flexibility also going further. That's the best guarantee actually also to keep competitive energy prices.
Yeah, and also, I mean, to secure project finance for any new investments. Do you see Fortum playing a role in providing such hedging instruments?
I mean, we are supporting customers in various kind of hedging instruments, and we have been seeing a development where we also have traded more bilaterally than in the past, exactly because there is not available on the liquid markets like that kind of products that the customers actually want to have. So I think it's a sad development because we have not been able to develop the derivatives markets and hedging markets accordingly.
Just taking a quick break in the episode to tell you about the Aurora Spring Forum 2023, where you can hear more from global energy leaders. It takes place on the 29th of March in Oxford, UK, and the conference offers a full day of intellectual engagement and thought-provoking analysis, with the opportunity to network with hundreds of the most influential players in the energy sector. The topic for this year focuses on facing new realities, rethinking energy use, supply and policy in the wake of the global energy crisis. You can find out more at auroraer.com/events/spring-forum. Now back to the episode.
One aspect that often comes to my mind if I think about the market reform of the Finnish, also the Swedish power market, is of course capacity markets, as we see a lot of European countries evolving in this direction with GB or Poland. So do you think focusing more really on the financial instruments, hedging instruments, is actually more effective than introducing a capacity market at some point?
I think, I mean, the capacity market is then, if we have really failed in developing the markets, then we might find ourselves in capacity markets. But for example, in the Nordics, I think the first is actually to enhance the Nordic cooperation, actually discuss markets holistically, including hedging markets. And that debate we don't actually have. And somehow maybe in the Nordic market, I'm a strong believer in the Nordic power market. And I see that by actually putting the like 7 countries together and trading like the power on a pan-Nordic approach, that has really enabled the Nordic competitiveness. So we are using the Norwegian-Swedish hydro battery, we are using the Finnish-Swedish nuclear, we are using the combined heat and power, now building more intermittent wind. And actually when this equation is working optimally, it's actually providing a lot of competitiveness. But somehow in recent decade, we have maybe forgotten to develop it holistically. And we have had mainly a focus on physical markets and ancillary services, not really actually, for example, creating the hedging instruments, what the increased volatility is also creating. So I would really want to see, let's say, more stronger Nordic cooperation actually in developing this animal. We can say that we have created a Nordic market that nobody is really owning, and various countries have different interests. And then if we find ourselves in a capacity market, then we have actually failed to develop our own marketplace. That might be that in the end of the day, we find ourselves there if the hedging instruments are not being created fast enough. But I would really push actually the governments and TSOs to take a stronger role also on actually enhancing the Nordic market and make it to deliver also some period further. I mean, there is a fundamental need for various players to hedge.
Yeah.
And if the marketplaces are not capable of delivering those hedging instruments, then you need a capacity market for it. So it's more like, are we able to develop the markets accordingly, or do we need something else?
And which country do you see should go into the lead there to restart the discussion around Nordic governance? Do you see Finland there?
I think, I mean, all the Nordic countries are different, and there is a live energy discussion in all the Nordic countries today. I think Norway has one debate, which is much related around the price areas and the retail prices and some cables to the continent. Sweden has a big discussion around the price areas also and the energy transition, and especially the high prices in the south. And Finland has more actually the discussion about security of supply, how to ensure that we are self-sufficient in every scenario. And And somehow it would be good that all of these discussions would somehow converge to one joint discussion, because actually we are dependent on each other, and actually you cannot look at any of the discussions in isolation if you don't look at the neighbors. So that the debate is actually quite different in all the three major shareholders in this Nordic market tells that we are not always as good as we should when actually aligning on the market design and energy political discussions. It doesn't either become easier. For example, also the different Nordic member state has different ambition levels on decarbonizations. Finland aimed to decarbonize by 2035, Sweden by 2045, and Norway doesn't have really a formal target yet, if I understood correctly. 2050 or something like that is the target, but it should still be happening on the same marketplace.
Yeah, and especially in front of the background that the Nordics do get more and more integrated. So, I mean, if we look into our scenarios, we see that with more transmission capacities between the different market zones, the prices converge and they become even more dependent on each other on electricity side, and maybe even for other commodities like hydrogen, with pipelines being deployed between the Nordic countries.
But I see that, I mean, by enhancing the Nordic cooperation in this area, there would be a huge value proposition actually also for all the Nordic countries, that if and when we are able to continue to use the Nordic energy resources efficiently and optimize them cross-border, we are also actually improving the competitiveness of our nations and making also the Nordics a quite attractive place for energy-intensive industries and industries who want to be responsible and also decarbonize.
Yeah. Okay. This is one other aspect I would like to discuss about your strategy, and this is nuclear. And just as a background for our listeners, I think Fortum operates the Finnish nuclear plant Loviisa, and is also co-owning the Finnish nuclear operator TVO. So, and nuclear is of course a topic that also splits the Nordics, as different countries have different opinions on that. So, how do you see it? Will the Nordic net zero power system in the future have more or less nuclear capacity than today?
We actually also shareholders in Forsmark and Oskarshamn in Sweden. But my question, I believe that there will be more nuclear. When I look at the forecasts that the various forecast agencies and TSOs come out with, that we assume that electricity consumption will grow by 50% in the 2 next decades to meet the decarbonization targets, but the Nordic countries have. I definitely believe that nuclear will also play a role in the future energy system, and there will be more nuclear in the Nordics also going further, together with much more new green power also.
Mm-hmm. And I saw that you are focusing at least on the development and research of a small nuclear reactors in the Nordics. So what do you think are the big challenges there to make this reality?
I mean, the nuclear industry has not actually developed for the last 20 or 30 years. We haven't done a lot of new build projects actually since the Chernobyl accident, Olkiluoto 3 being one of the new nuclear reactors being built and had its challenges to actually come online as fast as we wanted it to come. And I think that the nuclear industry actually has now both a huge opportunity for a nuclear renaissance with the small modular nuclear reactors, and the actually increasing need and understanding of nuclear in many European nations, in the US, in Canada, and globally. Then, of course, it's also for the industry to be able to deliver and actually also build and deliver the future projects on time and budget. And then it's, of course, also a lot related to nuclear legislation and regulation that will also enable new nuclear to come in. Still recently, for example, in Sweden, it has been forbidden by law to build more nuclear reactors than the 6 existing ones. Now the law is being changed and we are opening up that opportunity. So I think there's a huge opportunity and space for new nuclear to come in. But of course, both the industry, regulator, customers, everybody need to work hard actually to make that opportunity also possible.
Well, let's say the technology is there, and the laws have also been changed. For example, in Sweden, that you're allowed to add new nuclear at also different locations. Does the current market design actually is it sufficient for nuclear deployment, or do you need direct state support or any other forms of subsidies to incentivize that?
I mean, I think 2 things are important for nuclear. One is that, I mean, there needs to be a political acceptance that you can also hedge over time. So I mean, building a nuclear reactor takes several years, and then you operate it for decades. And you also need to ensure that there is strong political acceptance and societal acceptance for nuclear. Here, I think Finland has been quite well. There has been a strong support all the time, and we actually have one of the highest nuclear acceptances, like globally, even in the country, and sky-high nuclear acceptance currently. And Sweden, it has changed. Still somewhere backwards in history, Sweden made a political decision to close down the nuclear reactors. And that was in the 1980s after the 3 Mile Island accident. And now in recent decade, the tide has changed, and now there is a strong majority of the population actually supporting more nuclear. So I think it's important that there is a strong support, and of course then for the nuclear industry also to prove that it's operating safely and it's like responsible and so on, as we are doing with final spent storages in both countries. Then the other part is then of course the commercial viability, that a nuclear power plant you want to run commercially viable, and you want to ensure that it's commercially viable all the time.
Yeah.
And here of course also, let's say, hedging instruments are important. So if we just run on a very volatile physical market, which is volatile here and there, it's difficult to run nuclear. You need to have hedging instruments, either like through like liquid markets, bilateral to customers, or then if this is not coming, then you might need like also state support in providing that hedging instrument. And that hedging instrument is then actually taking down the cost of capital and de-risking the project. So I think this is also part of, let's say, market reforms we would need in the future.
Yeah, especially if you also like invest in this huge upfront capex that is required for the research, for development, and the first commercial installation, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. But as such, the nuclear technology is then fairly stable and viable when it's up and running and in operations.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, we're coming a bit to the end. So just to wrap up, I would like to come to the section overrated and underrated, or underrated. And I don't want to miss out on the opportunity to ask you on a few concepts in the energy transition, and I'll ask you if you think they're overrated or underrated. And don't feel the pressure to elaborate on the response, so you can keep it quite brief. And the first concept is, no surprise, a capacity market for Finland.
Finland and not the Nordics.
Yeah, this time for Finland.
I would say it's underrated, that if we are not able to develop, let's say, hedging markets, and that's a Nordic exercise, not only a Finnish exercise, then we might need capacity markets over time. But I would still want to push my wishes actually and hopes that we are able to develop our marketplaces also in the next period going further. But hedging instruments are definitely needed, better than we have today.
Okay, yeah, I mean that became quite clear in our conversation now. And maybe the next concept, now focusing more on a technology, batteries in the Finnish power system. Underrated or overrated?
It's underrated. I think batteries will play an important role going further. They have already become increasingly important, and they will be even more important in the next period.
Yeah, I would agree. Also looking at the projects that we have been involved in the last year, quite a lot of battery interest, both in Sweden and Finland. Third concept, the Nordics, given their clean and cheap energy, as a hub for green hydrogen exports.
It's underrated. I actually believe in this opportunity. And I also believe that this could be the way also to enhance the Nordic joint energy and climate policies. Because actually pooling our resources together and optimizing them, we will also be able to produce some of the most competitive green and clean hydrogen going further. And when we look also at the decarbonization challenges in Europe and globally, hydrogen will be needed. So I clearly see that also hydrogen could become a huge export opportunities for the Nordic countries if we pay the cards correctly. But if we try to play a Finnish hydrogen strategy, Swedish hydrogen strategy, Norwegian hydrogen strategy, and we're competing against each other, then we will not be successful.
Yeah, especially because you also need a joint effort to invest into the infrastructure, to pipelines or whatever is needed to actually bring the hydrogen from the north to the south.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Last concept, and given that Fortum is also partly state-owned, the concept of state ownership in utilities. Overrated or underrated?
It's overrated. I don't think actually the ownership plays such a big role. It's more actually about the business models and what kind of actually business model you have and how you actually play that. And then I see clearly that the investment needs in the green transition will become so huge. So we will need all kind of capital in, and no state capital alone will be sufficient for that either. So there will be a huge need for all kind of investments in this industry in the Nordics going further.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, this is not probably the natural time to finish. So I want to thank you, and we will watch your progress, which has huge implications for the Nordics and for the rest of Europe. So Simon, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Alexander. It was a pleasure.
That was Alexander Esser, who heads Aurora's Stockholm office in their coverage of the Nordic and Baltic energy markets, talking to Simon-Erik Ollus, Executive Vice President of Generation and member of the Executive Management of Fortum. Do keep an eye on our podcast feed for more in-depth conversations with senior members of the energy industry. The best way to do this is to subscribe on whatever platform you use. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.